They called him a drifter, a bother, a man out of time. But when he rolled up his sleeve, even the air seemed to stop breathing. Because stitched into that old jacket was a truth that could shatter every smug assumption in the room. He didn't argue when the receptionist muttered, "Security risk." Didn't flinch when the guard took his arm. Just slid up his coat cuff with one hand, revealing a frayed but unmistakable insignia. Greyhawk Division. Faded but alive. And then a voice cut the air like a blade. "Where did you get that?" The question didn't come from the rookie guard or the museum staff, but from someone whose face had turned to stone. The brigadier general wasn't asking. He was remembering. If you think stories like this should never be buried, hit subscribe and comment respect below. The museum doors sealed behind him with a hiss. Leonard Briggs stood just inside the atrium, shaking the wind off his battered coat. A plaid shirt tucked neatly into rugged jeans, and over it all, a time-worn Greenfield jacket, the kind stitched with ghosts. Just above the left shoulder, barely holding on, was the faded winged sword of the Greyhawk Division, nearly threadbare. Leonard didn't rush. No earbuds, no phone. Just a quiet nod to the front desk clerk, a nervous kid barely shaving, and a slow walk toward the Hall of Valor. His cane tapped lightly with each step, like an old clock counting down. "Sir," the clerk called out. Leonard paused, calm, unbothered. "Timed entry only, sir. Do you have a reservation?" Leonard's voice was smooth, like a song played from a vinyl record. "Number, I've been coming here every Heroes Week since they opened. Just needed a quiet moment." The kid bit his lip, glancing down at his screen. A second staffer leaned in and whispered something sharp, her face wrinkled like sour milk. Leonard caught enough to understand. He's just back to loiter again. Still, he walked. All the way to the end of the long hallway, where a thick oak bench faced a towering glass wall, its surface carved with names, thousands deep. Black glass like midnight. Leonard lowered himself with care, both hands resting atop the lion-shaped handle of his cane. No camera, no chatter, just stillness and names. So many names. The clerk, watching from afar, spoke into a radio. Seconds later, a young security guard emerged, buzz-cut, square-jawed, the kind of kid who thought respect came with volume. He marched straight toward Leonard like he was invading a battlefield. "Sir," the guard barked, "I need you to exit the museum immediately." Leonard turned his head, slow and level. "Why's that?" The guard hesitated, eyes darting. "Complaints. You've been reported for loitering." Leonard pushed himself upright, knees groaning their protest. He didn't raise his voice, just adjusted his sleeve, exposing the patch, the old winged sword now fraying at its seams. The guard grabbed his elbow, too firm, too eager. But before Leonard could take a step, a voice shattered the museum's quiet. "Let him go." Everything stopped. The guard froze mid-breath. Leonard turned his head slowly. At the entrance, standing tall in a perfectly pressed uniform, was a man built of command. Ribbons lit up his chest like medals of flame. Twin silver stars gleamed on his collar. A general. He didn't speak again, just stared at Leonard's patch like it was a photograph pulled from a funeral. Most days, Leonard Briggs moved like wallpaper there, but barely seen. At 78, he wasn't frail, just quiet. Life had slowed to simple rhythms. Wake at dawn. Pour strong black coffee into the same steel mug he'd carried through the jungle. A slow walk down Cedar Avenue, one steady step at a time. He liked the park benches under the maples, especially the one near the chipped war statue of a soldier holding binoculars and a question. No plaque, just stone eyes that never blinked. Leonard didn't wear medals, didn't talk about Kandahar or Laos unless someone pried. And these days, no one really pried. At Margot's diner, the waitress named June always brought him wheat toast, eggs soft, black coffee, no cream. She didn't call him sir, just Mr. Briggs. He liked that. It meant she still saw him, not just some wrinkled face with a cane. His apartment walls were clean but spare. No framed photos, no television, just a bookshelf, a weathered radio, and one box in the closet that hadn't been opened in a decade. Inside it, a Valor Cross, a black and white photo of 4 grinning soldiers, and a letter never mailed to a man who didn't come back. Sometimes Leonard would take out that photo. 3 boys with sleeves rolled up, boots unlaced, laughing like the world hadn't broken them yet. One of them was Billy Hart. The other was Leonard. They'd fought through fire together. Only Leonard returned. For years he wrote Billy's sister, sent Christmas cards, even visited once. But time erodes bridges, phone numbers change, and silence settles like dust. Still, every year, without fail, Leonard came to the museum. Not for parades, not for the speeches, just to sit, just to remember. This time, the staff didn't recognize him. Maybe they never had. He didn't come in dress blues, didn't boast, just looked like another man passing through until the past stepped forward to speak. His coat was too heavy for the weather, too worn, too full of stories, and in a place meant to honor memory, they tried to erase him like a smudge on polished glass. But not everyone had forgotten. One man had waited decades for this moment, and he had stars on his shoulders. The young guard's grip loosened like someone unplugged his confidence. Leonard turned slowly, steady as dusk, toward the man now standing at the entrance tall, sharp-edged, composed, his silver hair cut close, his eyes locked onto Leonard's jacket like it wasn't fabric, but a flag. The man stepped forward, completely ignoring the staff. "You're Leonard Briggs, aren't you?" Leonard tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. The voice it stirred something old, like a song half remembered. "I am," he said carefully. "And you are?" A smile flickered on the stranger's face. Not soft, not showy. Half salute, half ache. "Colton Hart. My father was Captain Billy Hart." Leonard's brow twitched. There it was, that old memory, dragged from the photo in his closet. A boy with wild eyes, perched in his father's arms. That father, the one Leonard pulled from a burning convoy. Leonard's voice thinned with memory. "You're his son." The General Hart nodded. He used to tell this story, about a busted-up radio tech with a limp who hauled him out through sniper fire and a jungle full of chaos. Said he owed his life to a man who didn't wait for permission, just moved. Leonard chuckled once, a dry scrape of amusement. Billy always did know how to stretch the truth. "No," the general said, voice like a verdict. "He didn't." Silence pressed into the lobby. Even the receptionist was frozen, pale and blinking. Hart turned to the security guard, still standing stiff as gilt. "You laid hands on a man wearing a patch older than your mother's high school diploma. Maybe remember that next time you mistake history for a loiterer." The guard swallowed something sharp. "I'm sorry, sir, but who he meant it for wasn't exactly clear." Leonard waved it off with a dry gesture. "Let the kid be. He didn't know." "That's the problem," Hart said flatly. "Too many don't." Then gently, "Would you come with me? There's something I'd like you to see." Leonard paused, just for a breath, then gave a small nod. The 2 men walked together, side by side, through the Hall of Valor. No one stopped them. No one dared. They moved past the bench Leonard had tried to sit at earlier, and Hart paused, motioning toward the glass wall of names. "You belong here," he said, "more than any brass or plaque we've ever put up." Leonard didn't say a word, but for the first time all day, his mouth bent into a faint smile. By sundown, the museum's administration office was a flurry of nervous phone calls. The general had spoken to the director directly, with firm courtesy, and zero wiggle room. "No press," he told them. "Not yet. Just fix what you broke." That night, Leonard made his usual walk home. Same sidewalk, same cane taps. But this time, people noticed. At Margot's diner, June waved before he'd even reached the window. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Briggs?" she called. Leonard nodded, eyes softening, looking forward to it. Back home, he turned on the old lamp by the window and sank into his chair. The air was still, the room quieter than usual. He hadn't had a visitor in weeks. Then knock-knock. Just 2 small taps. Leonard opened the door. A young man stood there in a worn navy hoodie, holding something in both hands. "Are you the same Leonard Briggs from this article?" Leonard squinted. "What article?" The man handed him an old newspaper clipping. The ink had yellowed, the edges curled. A photo from 1973 Leonard, younger, leaner, dirt, smeared across his jaw, standing next to a crippled armored transport. The headline read, Local Technician Saves Squad During Tunnel Collapse, Valor Cross Awarded. I found this in my grandfather's things, the man said. He told me about a guy rebuilt an engine under mortar fire. Saved them all. He said, that was your squad, wasn't it? Leonard ran his fingers across the picture, as if tracing the ghosts. I suppose it was, he murmured. The young man nodded once. Thank you, sir. He didn't linger, just turned and disappeared down the hall. Leonard closed the door gently behind him. Something sat heavier on his chest, but not in a bad way. The next morning, taped just outside the museum entrance, was a small, handwritten sign. To Sergeant Briggs, we remember. We apologize. Your seat is ready. On the very bench where he'd been quietly pushed aside the day before, a folded card now rested beneath the morning light. On the front, welcome back. Inside, in steady handwriting, we remember. And just like that, Leonard Briggs was no longer a footnote in an old roster. He was a presence the town had finally seen, and could never again unsee. The museum made no big declarations, no podiums, no camera crews. But the following Monday, a thick envelope arrived in Leonard's modest mailbox. Heavy paper, hand-addressed. From the upper corner, the name stood out. Marla Kendry, Director, Valor Remembrance Museum. Inside was one simple page. Mr. Briggs, we failed, not just in recognizing your service, but in recognizing you. Our staff acted with ignorance and without respect. That is ours to repair. You are always welcome here. No ticket, no appointment. We'd be honored to host a small gathering in your name, not as ceremony, but to say simply and clearly, we remember. With respect, Marla Kendry. Leonard stared at the letter for a long while. He didn't grin, didn't sigh. He folded it carefully and slid it into the top drawer of his desk, like something sacred. It felt like someone finally saw the outline of something they'd overlooked for years. That Friday, the general returned not in full regalia this time, but in a clean blazer and the kind of calm that didn't need insignias. He met Leonard at the diner. The two of them sat like old comrades, though they had barely shared a decade. I found the name, General Hart said, stirring his tea. Corporal Ellis. My father wrote about him in an old journal. Said he owed his life to a tech who didn't ask for orders, just moved. Leonard tapped his coffee mug gently. Ellis was solid. Held a support beam with both arms while I worked under it. That tunnel wouldn't have held otherwise. I was just the guy with the wrench. That wrench guy, the general said, kept half a unit alive with a bent axle and raw nerve. My father never forgot it. Leonard didn't respond. He didn't need to. That evening, the museum bench was no longer just a bench. A small wooden plaque had been affixed to the underside. Reserved, Leonard Briggs, Greyhawk Division. Still standing. Visitors noticed. Some slowed. A few paused to look at the wall behind it. And the older veterans? They saluted, even when the bench was empty. Then the young guard returned. The one who had grabbed Leonard's arm like he was trouble. This time he came alone, no badge visible. Just his cap in hand. I was wrong, sir, he said. I read your story. I didn't see it back then. Leonard nodded, quiet but firm. I didn't expect you to. Just make sure you see the next one. The guard nodded, swallowed, and walked off. Justice didn't announce itself. It just settled, like dust returning to the earth. What started as a quiet idea soon grew just a simple gathering, the director had said. No stage. No speeches, just a few people who remembered how to care. But in small towns, word doesn't travel by volume. It travels by meaning. By Sunday, folding chairs dotted the museum's lawn. No fanfare, no DJ. Just one flag at full mast, catching the autumn breeze like a breath. Leonard didn't want the front row, but General Hart had other plans. You earned that seat before most of us were born, he said. You're not disappearing into the back row today. Leonard wore the same field jacket, but this time, the patch had been restitched. Clean, upright, alive. People came. People he hadn't spoken to in decades. The waitress from the diner brought a warm apple pie tied with a red ribbon. A boy from the local high school paper took photos not for clout, but for memory. There were no speeches blaring through loudspeakers, no background music, just wind and footsteps. And then, the general stepped forward. He didn't unfold a note, didn't clear his throat. Some men leave footprints you don't see until they've nearly faded, he said, steady. They don't ask for applause. They don't expect spotlight. They just show up, again and again. He turned toward Leonard. When others ran, you stayed. When others waited, you acted. And when this town forgot, you came back anyway. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn box navy blue with rubbed corners. He opened it gently. Inside, a service medallion, engraved with a single phrase. Still speaks. Leonard didn't say a word. He just stood, slow and steady, knees creaking like old hinges, and accepted the medal with both hands. A few in the crowd stood, then more. And finally, everyone. No clapping, no cheering. They just stood, with him. Because some stories don't need volume, only presence. Moments don't need volume, they just need to be seen. The following week, the bench at the museum never stayed empty for long. Sometimes Leonard sat there, sipping from his old thermos. Other times, a student would perch beside it, scribbling into a notebook for a school essay. One morning, a woman left a bouquet of tiny white lilies in a chipped mason jar. No tag, no name. At Margot's diner, they stopped giving him a bill. No big deal was made of it. June just filled his cup, set down his plate, and gave a small nod. "You were always good to this place," she said once. "We just forgot to say it." Leonard nodded back, soft as the coffee steam between them. "That's all right. You're saying it now." Later that month, the local high school invited him to speak at their Veterans Day assembly. He declined at first, said he wasn't one for microphones. Then the principal sent a handwritten note. Below it, 20 student signatures. "We don't want a hero. We want someone real." That part stuck. So that Friday morning, Leonard stood behind a podium in front of 300 teens and teachers. No fancy slideshow, no crackling audio, just him and a folded piece of paper he never looked at. "I've been called a few things," Leonard said. "Technician, sergeant, husband, problem." He paused and let that last word settle in the air. "But titles don't matter half as much as showing up. I just kept showing up, even when no one noticed." A hush fell over the gym. "I didn't need applause. Still don't. I just wanted to know that what I gave meant something." He looked out across the sea of quiet faces. Some leaned forward, some blinked faster than expected. If someone in your life shows up for you, quietly, constantly, without asking for credit, notice them. That's service too. When he finished, no one rushed to clap. No one jumped to their feet. They just took it in. And that's exactly how Leonard wanted it. Not to be celebrated, just seen. It was almost winter when the porch light outside Leonard's apartment finally stopped flickering. He replaced the bulb himself standing on the second rung of a wobbly stool, muttering about cheap hardware and frozen fingers. But the light stayed on every night after that. Not because he was expecting company, but because, somehow, company kept showing up. June, from the diner, brought over a pie every Wednesday. The museum director stopped by with a history student who just wanted to know what jungle heat felt like. Even the young security guard came back one evening, this time with his father, a retired Air Force medic. The old man shook Leonard's hand like it meant something more than just manners. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. On Leonard's living room shelf, the medallion from the general sat next to the photo of 3 wild-eyed soldiers on a muddy road. Behind it, Leonard had stuck a small yellow note. "Still here. Still grateful." That night, as snow dusted the sidewalks like powdered memory, Leonard sat on his porch, flannel collar up, mug warm in his hands, porch light glowing above him like a silent flag. Across the street, a kid on a bike skidded to a stop. "Hey, Mr. Leonard," he called. "My teacher read your story in class." Leonard gave a small wave. She said you weren't loud like the other vets, but you still mattered. Leonard smiled. She's a sharp one. The boy nodded, then pedaled off, tires squealing around the corner. Leonard leaned back in his chair. The wood creaked under him, but it held, just like he always had. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like someone to move aside, or a name to forget. He just felt home. If you believe quiet dignity still matters in this noisy world, hit subscribe and comment respect below to help keep their stories alive.